Good morning. I'm Tasha Davenport, Deputy Executive Director for CASBO, and so thrilled to have, I think, 400 of you joining us today for this wonderful presentation by our own team of Sarah Bachez, our Chief Governmental Relations Officer, and Elizabeth Escoval, Senior Director of Policy and Governance here at CASBO. They're going to be sharing with you those political insights as we look to, again, still at reopening schools. Just a few logistics before we get started. I'll start with the first. As though choreographed, I'm at home, the dogs have started to bark, the construction has started, so I think it's just a full choreographed effort, and that's my disclaimer. Again, the logistics. First, we are recording the session for your listening pleasure and viewing pleasure later as well. The PowerPoints are posted in the Q&A and also in the chat, should you see that. So those PowerPoints are there, and all information will be available to you afterwards on our site. We'll be finishing the session today with a facilitated question and answer, so feel free to enter the questions that you have. We'll get to those when it's a kind of a more appropriate break. And again, we encourage you to always bring those questions forward so that if we don't have those answers at the moment, we can certainly go get them for you. A couple of others to mention is that next week in our summer speaker series, we will be talking about that important topic of cash flow. I think in any business, whether it be the government with the deferrals or private business, cash is king. And so we're going to be talking about some strategies around how to manage cash flow. We have following those, we've got HR considerations as schools reopen. We have a special ed, and those that summer speaker series will continue with just one little reminder that it will become a member-only, a subscription-only, if you will, benefit mid-August. So if you have not subscribed as your district, you'll want to do so to continue to enjoy all of this great insight that we're receiving. And finally, my only other promotion is that our professional development offering opens on Monday. So you'll see all of our programs that we're offering. Right now, we do have them lined up in an in an in-person format, but more important, we have them in an online format as well. So as you plan for the competency building for your district, you'll know that that resource is now open and available to you on our site. So without further delay, thank you, Sarah and Elizabeth, first of all, for all of the work that you continue to do, and then also for really gelling this experience and insight that you have for the audience today. So thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you all for joining us. This is the overview of what we will cover in today's conversation. It's a legislative update, so we are finishing up the end of session. We are going to review the legislature's stimulus plan, provide an update on bills, as well as a federal update. We'll go through the California Department of Public Health updated guidance, distance learning requirements, and the learning continuity and attendance plan. But before we get started on the legislature's economic stimulus plan, the race to the end of session is real. The legislature this year has lost a couple of weeks due to some members of the legislature being affected by COVID-19 and testing positive. So the legislature decided to take some extra precautions. And again, losing a couple of weeks during this valuable time, and they ended up just returning back to session this Monday, the 27th. That gives them just a month to be able to finish everything that they haven't been able to get done due to the interruption of this pandemic. So the race to the end of session is going fast, and it came by really, really quickly this Monday when they returned. With that, on Monday, they decided to introduce the economic stimulus plan. And this is a new revenue. This will provide new revenues without raising taxes. So raising $100 billion by encouraging Californians to prepay their income taxes in exchange for the future vouchers, borrowing funds from the federal government, and accelerating other sources of revenue. This plan will also support small businesses by expanding the small business tax credit and exclude them from increased unemployment insurance cost. It would protect working families by providing additional unemployment insurance, improving access to child care programs, and help return students safely to school in person while balancing the cost of schools and provide expanded broadband access to rural and unserved communities. And so if you see that bullet point, there's a lot to take in on that. The last thing, it would invest in the state's green economy to improve clean water delivery and create funds to incentivize clean vehicles. There's a lot to take in here. It's a very ambitious plan. This did not come as a bill, and it's really just a letter that was submitted on this is what they want to do. I believe that the hope was to get this into trailer bill language, but at this point, many of the conversations we've leadership is that they don't want to put big things into trailer bill. Trailer bill is intended to just be cleanup language only. And so again, this is a very ambitious plan. We'll see if it goes anywhere and whether the governor is going to take any sort of interest in pursuing this plan. And an update on bills. So for the most part, Sarah and I analyzed just over 2,000 bills the beginning of each session. About 400 of them end up impacting education directly, and we, on average, take about 40 to 60 positions on bills. And this year, that has dropped dramatically. As you can see, this short list, and actually, I think probably for the first time, we have more bills that we're supporting than we are opposing, so that's great news. But there was, again, with the disruption of COVID-19 and session going on and off, there was a letter that was sent out by leadership to the chairs of committees asking them to really consider which bills are going to be important for this year. Specifically, are they related to COVID-19, or is it an immediate emergency where legislation needs to take action? And so these are the top bills that CASBO is following. And AB 1384 by Assemblymember O'Donnell, this has to do with, this would provide temporary and limited liability for COVID-19 related injuries for school districts. This bill was not set for hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee. At this point, one can assume that the bill, since it was not set, may not be moving forward. But CASBO is one of the lead organizations that is moving the conversation forward. We are working on different ways to continue to push the issue. The bill was recently amended yesterday, and you can see an updated language on it today that really narrows the scope of the bill, that addresses a lot of the initial concerns that we got from the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee and a group of people who are in opposition to the bill. So we will continue to push that. We have 4 weeks to try to make something happen, but we are being very proactive right now to continue pushing this issue. We know how important this is. AB 1837 by Assemblymember Smith. This bill was not hearing. There was a hearing yesterday in the Senate Education Committee. This bill was not on that list. I can assume that at this point, with no other Senate education hearings being listed, that this bill is one of those that will not be moving forward. On the other hand, SB 614 by Senator Rubio, that has to do with the teacher credentialing and RECA test, and SB 884 by Senator Dodd, that has to do with public safety power shutoffs. Those two bills were the only bills listed to be heard next Monday in the Assembly Education Committee. And we just found that out this morning. And so it really goes to show how fast and how quick things are moving. We have to keep an eye on all the materials that we see every single day because things are changing so rapidly. What we have on the opposed side is AB 1835 that has to do with LCFF, the supplemental and compensation grant dollars and how they're spent. This bill did get out of the Senate Education Committee yesterday with a unanimous bipartisan support. It got out 7-0. We will see this bill move forward to the Senate Appropriations Committee before it goes to the Senate floor for a vote. We were the first ones to oppose this bill and continue to oppose it throughout this whole year. So that is that. I will add another curveball from this Monday, another bill that was introduced, and it's not listed on here, but it's 1253 by Assemblymember Santiago that lays out 3 new surcharges on income tax for California's highest earners, with the hope to bring in $6.8 billion in new annual revenue, and which schools would benefit from this. So this was a bill that was just proposed on Monday, and very ambitious. We'll keep an eye on it and see if it moves forward.
It's been super busy on the policy side, and I'm very grateful for her leadership. Moving back to the state budget, we know that the Department of Finance was expecting for revenues to come in. Tax collection was delayed to July 15th. On July 20th, Department of Finance reported that general fund cash was up by $1 billion above the estimates for the 2020-21 enacted budget. And then for 2019-20, as they were closing out the fiscal year, revenues came up by $1 billion as well, moving it to $124.5 billion. So we did a breakdown of the 4 major tax revenues that the state collects on personal income tax. It's now at $82.5 billion, up by $662 million, sales, corporate tax, and insurance tax. As Elizabeth mentioned, we are hearing that any updates that go through the budget process, and we see in trailer bill that it's focusing more on technical issues in nature, but we have heard loud and clear that the state still needs to provide clarity on the use of federal funds. Can LEAs use the funds under the CARES Act for PPE and facility needs to safely return to in-person instruction? We have heard from growing districts in terms of the 88 hold harmless language and the interactions and fiscal impact that creates. And then clarity on the requirements on distance learning, which we'll discuss in a second, as well as extending expenditure deadlines for the Proposition 98 general fund portion that is aligned in under the learning loss mitigation section. It currently states that those dollars need to be spent by December 30th. Given that those are state dollars, we are advocating to extend the deadline until the end of the fiscal year to allow school districts more flexibility. So this is something that we're currently engaged in. We know that as part of the Education Coalition, we're continuing to have meetings to continue to sound the alarm that schools still need a lot of resources in order to safely return, if that is going to be a possibility given the latest shutdowns on counties, and Elizabeth will go through that. On the federal side, because it's been exciting, we did this crosswalk to walk you through the different federal stimulus proposals. And so the federal government has returned from their summer recess, and there's 3 proposals out on in discussion. The first one on the left side is from the House Democrats. That's the Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act, the HEROES Act, which would appropriate $58 billion to K-12 education, 61% on states' share of the population ages 5 through 24, and 39% on the state's relative numbers of low-income students. And then it does have an MOE criteria that states must provide assurances that it will provide at least as much funding to schools as a percentage of the total state expenditure that it provided in 2020, in 21, and 22 as it provided in fiscal year 2019. Now, the second component, the second row that you column that you see there is the Senate Democrats proposal, and that stands for Coronavirus Child Care and Education Relief Act. And that would provide additional money to education in the total of $175 billion to be shared under Title I distribution, with 20% of the ESSER funds to be set aside to measure and address learning loss, professional development, and family assistance. And it does have an MOE criteria. The schools have to provide at least as much funding to schools in 2020, 21, and 22 as they provided in the fiscal years 2019 or 2020, whichever is higher. These funds must be used to supplement, not supplant, state and local expenditures on schools. And the last one that we just saw released a few days ago is the Senate Republicans version, which stands for Health, Economic Assistance, Liability Protection in Schools, the HEALS Act, which would provide $70 billion to schools, 60% based on the state population and 40% based on Title I share. A third of those funds would go to LEAs and private schools based on their population and Title I share, regardless of reopening criteria. And it does have an MOE criteria. The schools must maintain school funding as a proportion of the funding for this year, equivalent to what they spent in 2019. And then moving forward on addressing connectivity, both the House and the Senate Democrats proposals have a funding tied to providing connectivity. On the House Democrats, it's $1.5 billion distributed through the Federal Communications Commission, not necessarily through E-rate. And because of what we've seen in disputes and litigation now with the USDE Secretary DeVos, the House Democrats have laid out criteria reversing the USDE's guidance on equitable services and requires implementation to be under Title I. It also eliminates the micro-grant proposal in the CARES Act, and it includes new limitations on Secretary DeVos's ability to establish priorities and preferences on the use of the funds outlined in the HEROES Act. Moving on to the Senate Democrats, they provide two set-aside supplemental funding of $11 billion, one for Title I and one for IDEA. They would also provide connectivity funding of $4 billion distributed through E-rate. And they also, in conjunction with the House Democrats, would reverse USDE guidance on equitable services and requirements on how to implement the funds based on Title I distribution, and provides no funding for Secretary DeVos's discretionary priorities.
And what we see in the HEALS Act and not in the other two is that schools would be eligible for funds. It creates a new voucher program, and that money can be spent on any educational expenses. This next piece has to do a little bit on the liability. It creates a federal cause of action for the coronavirus exposure claims against schools. And this cause of action is the exclusive remedy for all claims against a defendant or personal injury caused by an actual, alleged, feared, or potential exposure to coronavirus. And so this piece right here has caused a little bit of tension between what we're trying to do here in California and what the federal government and the direction that they want to move in. A couple of other concerns raised here is, in order to receive funding, LEAs will submit reopening plans to the state governor. And upon receipt of those federal funds, states will award funding to LEAs according to its reopening plans. A district that has at least 50% in-person instruction would be eligible automatically, and a district that does not provide in-person instruction to any students will not be eligible for any funding. A district that offers a hybrid learning options to less than 50% of students would have funding determined in a prorated basis. So moving on to the Department of Public Health updated guidance, where we will cover the in-person reopening criteria, testing procedure, the school closure criteria, and mask requirements. So the in-person reopening area is using health data that schools can physically open when its county has been off the county monitoring list for 14 days. Schools that don't meet this requirement must conduct the academic year via distance learning. Elementary schools can seek a waiver from the local health official to open for in-person instruction. And if a school or district reopens in person and its county is later placed on the county monitoring list, the school should begin testing staff or increase frequency of test, but they are not required to close. So the local health officials will review local conditions and consult with the Department of Public Health when considering a waiver request. And when schools reopen in-person services, it's recommended that surveillance testing be implemented based on the local disease trends to detect potential cases as lab capacity testing allows. In the event that the county is placed on the county monitor list, as I mentioned, testing staff and increased frequency of testing is recommended but not required. There are currently 37 counties on the watch list, with 36 of them required to close almost all indoor activities.
And then we've gotten a lot of questions in terms of the waiver, and we were informed last week that sometime this week and hopefully before the end of the week, we will see the guidance that the Department of Public Health, in collaboration with local county health officials, will use in developing the waiver criteria. The waiver will be developed by the Department of Public Health. And a question we've posed is, what is that criteria? What happens when multiple school sites are requesting this? In the guidance, it states elementary schools without really stating the grade spans, and we know that there are elementary schools that vary in K through 5, K through 12, and then we have unified school districts. So what we were informed is anyone that is an elementary school, regardless of grade span, would be able to seek a waiver. But in that waiver, you have to work in collaboration with your partners and work with your local health official when discussing if you're going to use this criteria. On the testing procedures, the guidance does state that school staff are essential workers, that school districts shall test staff periodically when testing capacity permits and as practical. An example that they posed is testing all staff over a 2-year period, 25% of staff being tested over that 2-week period, or 50% of staff every month, rotating testing of all staff over time. And that the state is working on improving their contact tracing measures and are prioritizing schools. One thing that we've noted on testing is that on July 23rd, the Department of Public Health has released updated COVID-19 testing guidance, which includes educational staff as part of the Tier 3 out of 4 in testing priority lists. The Department of Public Health is prioritizing testing hospitalized individuals with signs of COVID-19 symptoms, followed by testing other symptomatic individuals and higher risk asymptomatic people. This is a question that we have posed in terms of as we try to have personnel available for educational services, nutritional staff, transportation services, the capacity that the counties will have and healthcare in general of providing these tests, something that we have raised in terms of who is paying the cost of these tests, how do we afford release time, how do we ensure that we attain the information in a manner that allows for timely decisions. On the school closure criteria, we have been informed as part of the guidance is that one confirmed case, be it a student or a staffer in a classroom, means that an entire classroom cohort is to be quarantined for 14 days. Now, if it scales up to 5% of total staff and students, then the school site will be required to close and quarantine for 14 days. A school site may reopen after those 14 days with deep cleaning and disinfecting, public health inspections, and consultation with your local public health department. Now, at an entire school district, the threshold was set at 25% or more of your schools being closed equates to a full school closure of the district. School districts may reopen after 14 days, but that's in consultation with your local public health departments.
So for mask requirements, all school staff and students in 3rd grade and above must wear masks unless the student is exempt. Students in 2nd grade and below are encouraged to wear masks or face shields. And to develop protocols to provide face covering to students who forget theirs to prevent unnecessary exclusions, and then also offer alternative educational services from those students who are excluded from campus. And so I know one of the questions that was asked is, what do you do with the student who is refusing to wear a mask on campus? And regardless if it's a student or staff, they are not allowed to be on the campus unless that they are exempt. And I think that the administration had to really lay the foundation for that. So there's no exposure, there's no increased exposure or unnecessary exposure at schools. And that's why the alternative educational service would be provided to them.
And then a question came in regarding we have not seen anywhere that it says that the school site or school districts are required to provide childcare to staff. That is not in any of the guidance or budget language or budget requirements. And yes, as part of the waiver, it needs to be in consultation with various stakeholders. So moving on to your in-person learning, we wanted to first take on the new guidance and then how it will interact now with SB 98's both the in-person learning and distance language requirements. For 2020-21, for the purposes of calculating our apportionment for LEAs, it does state that LEAs shall offer in-person instruction and may offer distance learning, and this is under Section 34, Education Code 43500, and it defines in-person instruction when it's in immediate physical supervision and control by of a certificated employee of that LEA while engaging in education activities with students. I know we've gotten a lot of questions given that counties have now shut down or are scaling back because they're on these county monitoring lists, is that there might need this is an opportunity to seek additional clarification from the state in terms of with this updated guidance where we're now saying that schools can and will begin distance learning because their counties are on the county monitoring list. We might need to seek clarification through statute of when can we reopen in person, that there is room for hybrid models, and that in order to do in person, it requires collaboration with your local public health officials. SB 98 in this section does not state when the LEAs to offer in-person instruction. And so we know that this is an area where we might just need to get more clarification given the latest updates from the state regarding how do we reopen in person. On the distance learning requirements, we've learned that in March, when the governor issued an executive order requiring distance learning, there wasn't much structure and requirements put in place. And this is a completely new model that LEAs overnight turned on in order to continue to delivering services. Since that time, the legislature and the administration have stepped in and provided requirements and structures of what distance learning will look like when we begin the new academic year. So the requirements under the Section 34 state that instruction in which a pupil and an instructor are in different locations and the pupils are under the general supervision of a certificated employee, distance learning may include, but it's not limited to the following three objectives of interaction and instruction using technology, video or audio instruction using a computer or communication technology like phones, and it allows for the use of printed materials. And I think this is where it recognizes not every area and not every student, depending on their grade, is adept in using technology for their instruction. So it does say that the use of print materials can be incorporated. So Elizabeth, when can distance learning be offered?
So distance learning may be offered under either of the following conditions: on a local educational agency or school-wide level as a result of an order or guidance from a state or local public health official, or for students who are medically fragile or be put at risk by any in-person instruction, or who are self-quarantining because of exposure to COVID-19. And there was a lot of questions and concerns around the initial language that we saw. And the legislature did submit a letter to the journal to clarify that this section is not intended to prevent an LEA from adopting a distance learning, hybrid, or mixed delivery instructional model to ensure safety. Instead, this section is intended to grant flexibility to an LEA to determine what instructional model the LEA will adopt during the COVID-19 pandemic, taking into account the needs of their students and staff and their available infrastructure, provided the models adhere to the applicable state or local public health order or guidance. And so the intent of this language is to allow LEAs to offer distance learning based on the unique circumstances of each student. And we have the distance learning requirements here. Students' access to internet and devices to participate in the educational programs, content aligned to grade level, substantially equivalent to in-person instruction, address the needs of students not performing at grade level, special education and related services required by an IEP, design and integrated instruction and English language development, and daily live interaction with certificated staff. For daily live interaction, it may take the form of internet or telephone checkup, or by other means of permissible under public health orders. If daily live interactions is not feasible as part of regular instruction, the school board shall develop, with parent and stakeholder input, an alternative plan for frequent live interactions.
And then there is instructional minutes requirements. The legislature felt that because the state was not reducing funding, it was providing the same level without COLA of 2019-20 funding. It did go ahead and continue the requirement of 180 instructional days for school districts, 175 instructional days for charter schools. And it states in this section of the Education Code 43504 that LEAs shall offer in-person instructions to the greatest extent possible. And it sets the minimum school days. It does lower than, it has a lowered expectation that allows for hybrid models. It sets a minimum school days for kindergarten and all the grade spans, and it does provide then their definition of instructional day is in a day in which the pupils are scheduled for the length of day established by the school board in a classroom under the immediate supervision of a certificated employee or in distance learning that meets the minimum requirements. There is now an attendance tracking mechanism. I know this is also new given that we are in this new environment of doing distance learning, and these are systems that we're creating from scratch in terms of how to monitor daily documentation of each student and each school day during each school day in whole or in part for which they're attending via distance learning. These criteria listed on this slide are going to be the criteria that are audible, that we are going to engage with the state controller's office because they're responsible for what the guidance will look like. And if these criteria are not met, this is what the state superintendent can use to withhold funding from school districts. So this slide is really critical that we really get a handle on documenting daily participation, that we establish a weekly engagement record for each student that documents the following 3 items: synchronous or asynchronous instruction in distance learning, verification of daily participation, and tracking assignments, and that the school districts develop a written procedure on a tier engagement structure on how to retain and attain students who have been absent, and how to deal with students who have been absent from distance learning for more than 3 school days or 60% in a school week. And so those criteria must include verifying the student's contact information, daily parental notices regarding their student's absence, and a plan for outreach if the child requires health or social services when feasible, and maybe considerations of transitioning that student back to in-person instruction. And again, going back to communicating with the parent and the guardian on the student's academic progress. This is a criteria that does not set how long, and there's no state mandate of how long a child is to be in the structure of the instructional minutes in a synchronous or asynchronous instructional model. There's no mandate that it has to be an X amount or percentage. So we wanted to clarify that. And then the financial penalty that I was mentioning, in this code section, it states that the state controller shall include instructions to enforce in the state audit guide the requirements of how we will enforce this criteria of attendance. It states that after September 1 of 2020, if an LEA fails to complete the daily participation, the weekly engagement records, and abide by the attendance requirements, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman, is required to withhold funding from the LEA's local control funding formula for the prior year's ADA of each affected grade level. The sum of 0.056 multiplied by that apportionment for each day less than what was required pursuant to this section. CASBO, as well as the other statewide organizations, we are going to begin meetings in August with the State Controller's Office to discuss the development of these guidance per this section. Our goal is to ensure that guidance comes out no later than September 1st, because we understand the importance of ensuring that you know what the standards are and that LEAs are not penalized for instructions that we did not have prior, as you are all building out these systems.
So we'll go ahead and transition over to what we kind of call the amended LCAP, the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. And so before we get started on the details of that, the Local Control and Accountability Plan, or the annual update to the LCAP, is not required in 2020-21, but a budget overview for parents must be adopted by December 15th, and that requires a separate public hearing to discuss and adopt the budget overview for parents. And so the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan is a key part of the overall budget package for K through 12 that seeks to address funding stability for schools while providing information to the local educational agency level for how students continue learning, how that will be addressed during the COVID-19 crisis in the 2020-21 school year. The provisions of the plan were approved by the governor and the legislature in June in the SB 98 and can be found in the Education Code section 43509. The LCAP is intended to balance the need of all stakeholders, including educators, parents, students, and community members, while both streamlining engagement and condensing several pre-existing plans. In particular, it was important to combine, one, the intent behind the Executive Order N5620, published in April of 2020, which envisioned an off-cycle LCAP, Local Control and Accountability Plan, due to December 15th, and two, the ongoing need for LEAs to formally plan to return to school in the midst of the uncertainty and of COVID-19 without requiring 2 plans. The Learning Continuity Plan replaces the LCAP for the 2020-21 school year. The Learning Continuity Plan shall also be presented at a public hearing for review and comment and adopted at a public meeting, but not in the same way as a public hearing. The reviewing authorities do not approve the learning continuity plans, and county offices of education and the Department of Education may submit recommendations in writing for amendments to the learning continuity plans by October 30th, 2020. The school districts and county offices of education must consider the written recommendation at a public hearing within 15 days of receiving the recommendations, and charter schools are not contemplated in the recommendation language. And this is an overview of what the stakeholder process looks like. Who should you be consulting with? That's your teachers, other personnel, staff, union, parents, and students. Who should you solicit input from? And that's to notify the public of opportunities to provide written comments regarding the specific actions and expenditures proposed in the continuity plan. And the Parent Advisory Committee, presenting this plan to the Parent Advisory Committee and the English Learner Advisory Committee in a separate meeting for review and comment. And the superintendent of the local educational agency will respond to comments in writing. The public hearing, post 72 hours before a public hearing, provide options for remote participation, and reach students, families, and educators without internet or language barriers. And an overview of what that actually looks like. The overview provides a description of how the LEA will provide the learning and address impact of COVID-19 on students, staff, and the community. And again, with the specific action expenditures to support its ability to address the impacts of COVID-19. The description of the stakeholder engagement process and the way to solicit stakeholder feedback, and instructional offerings with the description of actions that LEA will take to offer classroom-based instruction whenever possible, particularly for students who have experienced significant learning loss due to school closures in 2019-20, or students at risk of experiencing learning loss due to future school closures. On the distance learning program, there's a description to do a number of things. Again, it's how the LEA will provide distance learning throughout the school year so that they have a full curriculum that's similar to those as in person. How there's going to be access to devices and connectivity, access to students' progress and live contacts, and synchronous instructional minutes. Description of professional development and resources provided to staff. The staff roles and responsibilities changes due to COVID-19, and support for students with unique needs, including those that are English learners and special education students, foster youth, and homeless youth.
And as Elizabeth mentioned, this new learning continuity and attendance plan, because we love our acronyms, and it's not the new LCAP, but it still has the same letters. It's in replacement of that local control and accountability plan, and it continues then with making sure that LEAs are describing their pupil learning loss. There's a huge focus, and dollars were set aside to address learning loss. Specifically for disadvantaged students, and how the effectiveness of the services provided, will they be measured. Mental health and social and emotional well-being has also been highlighted and will be included in the new learning continuity plan, as well as engagement and outreach and child nutrition, which was part of the executive order to continue to provide child nutrition during the school closures in March. And so they want a description of how the LEA will continue to provide those meals for eligible pupils. And the last portion of the new learning continuity plan is to increase and improve services for foster youth, English learners, and low-income students, describing how the needs of these students were considered and the actions to effectively meet the goals of these students. we have anywhere where you see in the PowerPoint that it's underlined, that's where the hyperlink is embedded. So the learning continuity plan is embedded in your section of these presentations so that you could see the Department of Education, which was entrusted with creating the template, has already released a draft and is seeking public comment. We know that their next webinar is scheduled next week on Monday, August 3rd, to discuss and again present in more further detail the way that LEAs are to use the LCAP, the new Learning Continuity Plan. And with that, we'll now open it up to questions. You're welcome to raise your hand through the pressing the hand icon or to type in your question in the Q&A box. As part of this presentation, the resource section page also has updated hyperlinks. We've updated a risk management guidebook that has all the updated links. So please, I'll turn it to Christina and see if there's any raised hands at the moment so we could answer your questions.
Thank you, Sarah. At this time, the floor is open. I have no raised hands, so a few questions in the chat box, in the question and answer box, excuse me. Sarah, would you please readdress the question on required or asked to provide no cost childcare for staff?
On the requirement, we have not seen that as part of statute. It hasn't been part of any executive orders or conversations. We know that this is something that various unions have been pressing for in the event that school districts are asking for staff to return physically and teach from their classrooms remotely. But in part of state guidance, we have not seen that that is a push here in Sacramento. We're sure that it's something that's being advocated with legislators to make it as a requirement, but that is something that it's at the discretion of every LEA to determine how do you want to proceed forward on that labor issue.
Thank you, Sarah. Again, there's no hands at this time, but a few questions if you'd like me to go over those.
Yes, I'm trying to scroll through them.
No worries. Let's go backwards. We have a question on if an employee refuses to wear a mask, even if it's been required by the superintendent, what is their recourse, perhaps?
And because the requirement is under the state's Department of the California Department of Public Health, it does state that all staff must wear a mask. It is required by the state. It is not something that is waivable for staff, for the adults. There is a component, as Elizabeth mentioned, on the mask requirements section that for grades under grade 2, it's recommended but not required for grades 3 and above. For students, if there is an exception to be made, an alternative system should be devised for that student if a mask is not something that a child can wear, that student can wear. But for adults, it is required by the state to have a mask.
Thank you, Sarah. In regards to the weekly engagement record, would the gradebook attendance record recorded or maintained in Aries meet this requirement?
And I will bring that up during our August meeting with the State Controller's Office. This is why it's critical to ensure that you have that guidance. We believe that anything that records, like Google Classroom records when students interact and submit their assignments. Unfortunately, through Zoom doesn't capture minutes, doesn't capture interactions in the same way. So that's a great example, and it's something that we'll bring up as we begin those deliberations, with the goal of having the State Controller's Office come up with, release the guidance so that we know what meets then the weekly engagement record, what meets the daily interactions, and how you're devising these systems. And then Trish asked regarding LEAs are required to meet the annual instructional minutes requirements. In SB 98, all we see right now is requirements for 180 instructional days, and then the set minimum daily minutes based on grade span. We did not see anything in regards to the annual instructional minutes requirement. But let me verify. And then someone asked if we could go back to the daily live interaction with certificated staff. Also for asynchronous learning, can you have a smaller group, or is there a requirement for whole group interaction? So the requirement with live interaction with certificated staff, let me go back to that slide just so that we could all see it. On the live interaction information, what we know is that you can use internet or the telephone, whatever is permissible under your public health orders to interact with students. And that it can be, there is no minimum requirements of how much of that interaction has to take place within the minimum instructional minutes per day. And so one thing we have requested is there an ability to allow LEAs, even if counties are currently on the county monitoring list, if school sites can allow for a smaller group like special education students, English learners to come in and attain their instruction in person. Our feedback that we have received from the state is make sure that everything you do is in collaboration and coordination and supported by your local public health official. In regards to determining how to calculate the private school share, as many of you might be aware, the state of California filed a lawsuit against USDE's interpretation of that language. We're still seeking clarification from our California Department of Education on that distribution, and we should hopefully see something shortly from the Department of Education. Anytime that we see this type of information, our goal is to submit a news break in regards to that information.
Sarah, I want to jump in. We have a hand on the floor. Donald, did you want to go ahead and address the panel? Don, the floor is yours. It's possible we're having some microphone issues. Donald, if you wanted to address the panel using the question and answer box, we'll make sure your question gets asked.
And while we wait, we did have a question regarding instructional minutes requirements for same in-person and distance learning, and the answer is yes. You could, the minutes, it doesn't state that the minimum requirement is just for in person or just for distance learning, and can be used in either settings or in a hybrid model. Our understanding regarding employee testing is that it is required by the state of California, so that is something that it should not be negotiated. The concern that we have raised with the governor's office and the Department of Finance is in terms of testing availability, how do we ensure that staff have a site and with a test and the proximity of turning that information around and the school district attaining the testing results without violating any of our HIPAA laws, as well as what will be the tracing and reporting. And that is all being coordinated with the local public health officials. It's something that the Department of Public Health is working closely with with our county health officials. One aha moment from the state was how complex education districts are. There was a belief that we're very cookie cutter, that an elementary school only goes to a certain grade level, that middle school is a certain box, and that there's high schools. And so it was interesting to have conversations with the state in terms of how LEAs actually operate, and that we really need to be part of these conversations as these guidance come out, so that we're all on the same page and that we could ensure a safe return whenever possible to back in person. Under SB 98, we did not see that there is a limit on the time for the live session to take place. And we've received a few questions in terms of staff refusing to wear the mask, and if that's grounds for dismissal. We believe that that's something to discuss with your HR and your legal counsel to ensure that you're properly documenting these situations. And given that it's a requirement by the state that adults wear their mask, there needs to be that training, that staff be aware that this is coming from the state, that this is non-negotiable. And with that, Christina, any other questions that we may have, we're always available via email. Elizabeth and I are here to support our members, so we look forward to engaging and providing additional updates as they come out from the state as well as the federal government. We know that every day is a new day with new challenges and interesting information. So I will turn it back to Tasha.
Again, thank you for joining us. Not much to add to that great and very informative, very insightful presentation. Continue to check back in as resources are added with the answers that our advocacy team get answered on a daily basis. So thank you for your participation. Have a great week ahead, and we'll see you on the next summer speaker series. Thank you.